It's early 2004 and everybody still is using their flip phones. But it was around this era when the God of Thunder was cooking up something that would revolutionize the way we use our smartphones. Yes, ladies and gents, I am talking about the birth of the iPhone. This is everything that we know that revolutionized the iPhone from looking like this into looking like this. Kinda like this sexy beast, am I right, ladies? No! It was mid-2004 when Motorola, that's right, Motorola, went up to Apple and asked them if they wished to collaborate on making a new phone. And Apple was like, sure. Then in September 7th, 2005, that phone got revealed and was named the ROKR E1, aka the freaking iTunes phone. This was the first phone to ever support iTunes. That is right, Apple's first hands-on experience on a phone was indeed a Motorola. Raider! But once it hit retail stores, Steve wasn't too happy. He looked at this as a big company mistake, letting an outsider create and design a phone using the Apple banner. He was worried about the future of Apple. He wasn't a big fan of the cheap quality materials used to make the phone, as well as the really poor camera quality that it had. This phone initially only had one job, and that was just to be a cell phone with iPod functionality, and it failed to do that. It had a 100 song limitation, which at that time, iPods were able to store up to 1,000 songs. It had no way to make iTunes purchases off the phone directly, so you still had to text 6767 to those shady TV ads to download certain songs. So Steve took actions in his own hands and discontinued support for the iTunes phone. And surprisingly, this had zero impact on consumers that already owned this phone.
Mario! My iTunes phone doesn't communicate with my iTunes library.
Don't be silly. You never had an iTunes library.
Good point. Back to downloading weird TV ads.
So a few months later, after the phone was already in the market, Steve Jobs put together two separate teams, both working on separate prototypes. Team 1 was managed by Tony Fadell, who was focusing on the concept of bringing the retro iPod look to the smartphone. And thank goodness this one didn't went through, because this would have been like the 1940s all over again, having those rotating circle wheels. Imagine updating your social media with that. But once he presented the P1 prototype to Mr. Jobs, he wasn't amused.
What the hell was that?
And then Team 2 was managed by a gentleman named Joseph Ive. You know, Joseph Ive, the guy in those Apple commercials where there's parody videos up on YouTube. The guy who has a very fancy way of saying
aluminium, raw aluminium, this aluminium alloy, aluminium hinge, aluminium unibody aluminium, high grade aluminium.
Yeah, that guy. He was the chief manager designer for the prototype P2, and this one was on the right track. It may not look like much, but this was the concept that helped evolve the smartphone industry. For being the first phone was a large multi-touch touchscreen. And once the phone structure was complete, it then got handed over to Scott Forstall, who developed the first OS for the iPhone. Then 18 months later, after the iTunes phone was discontinued, on January 2007, Apple co-founder Steve Jobs unveiled the first official iPhone. And the crowd applause with awe. That cell phone at the time was something new that no other industry has ever seen before, and was set at a new price point that was ridiculously high compared to smartphones around that era. Then after that presentation, Steve Ballmer, who at that time was Microsoft CEO, who was rivaling the iPods with the Zoom MP3 players, and he had this to say.
$500? That is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers.
And then after all that, fast forward a bit, in June 2007, the iPhone goes on sale, all the Apple stores are packed, and within the first 70 days, it already went ahead and sold 1 million iPhones. It was such a success that Time magazine put it in the cover of Best Invention of the Year. Then in June 2008, the iPhone 3G gets announced. This was the first phone that brought us the Apple App Store. At that time, only had 500 apps compared to now. It was the first one to have built-in GPS, as well as connect to the latest 3G cellular network. And was a bit more affordable since now it had a couple other pricing options with a 2-year contract. And then once that phone finally hit the market, it already sold 1 million iPhones within the first week. Then, continuing Apple yearly releases, in June 2008, the iPhone 3GS gets announced. It was much more quicker than the previous iPhones, hint the S, which stands for speed, some will say. It was the first iPhone to finally get video recording. Yes, the previous iPhones only was able to take pictures. Came in 2 different color options, black or white, and copy and paste on a phone finally became a thing. During this era was also the first time we got introduced to jailbreaking our phones. Man, I miss those simple days. All you had to do, if I remember, was go on Safari, jailbreakme.com, and slide and your phone was jailbroken. No computer required. Which led to a big law discussion if this was legal or not. And at the end, it was perfectly legal because it's your device. You can do whatever the heck you want to do. Sales of the 3GS was 1 million within the first weekend. But now it's 2010 and Apple was feeling very salty because the competition started heating up. HTC, Nexus, and Samsung were starting to share a very similar resemblance on the keyboard and some touchscreen gestures. So Apple started going on a suing spree.
You can't just...
Then once Apple finished filing up those lawsuits, an iPhone 4 was founded at a bar in San Jose, California, was left behind and forgotten by an Apple engineer, and that iPhone then got sold to Gizmodo, who then opened it up and confirmed it was indeed an iPhone 4. I wonder what poor excuse that Apple employer said when he got back to work on what happened. And then in June, once Apple officially released the iPhone 4, it confirmed everything that we already know from Gizmodo report, from it having a front-facing camera, all glass body, an aluminum antenna wrapping, as well as all the internal upgrades. But as soon as it hit the market, AntennaGate became an issue. Consumers were reporting issues whenever making phone calls and holding the phone on your hand, they tend to lose signal dramatically. So Apple listened and released a case program that gave all new iPhone 4 users 1 free bumper to hopefully prevent this issue from ever occurring. This was honestly a pretty dope move from Apple because they could have just left it like, oh, just put on a case and you'll be fine. But instead, they gave everybody a free bumper case of their choice. Well, 1, that is. So next year later, April 2011, Apple goes up to Samsung and files more lawsuits because Apple was still on that suing spree. But then, unfortunately, on October 5th, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away at age 56. He was fighting cancer for almost a decade. And that previous day, the iPhone 4S got announced at its keynote. This iPhone 4S was the first one that gave us a voice assistant, Siri. They fixed the antenna issue and was also the first iPhone to shoot full HD at 1080p, and was also the new record of smartphones sold, as this one sold a whopping 1 million iPhones within the first 24 hours. And during this time, this was when iPhones became into the most used cameras, beating DSLRs and other point-and-shoot brands. I mean, why wouldn't they? Anybody and their mom could easily use these iPhones cameras to take photos without needing to know anything about the ISO or shutter speed. So in September 2012, the next Apple keynote aired. This one releasing a new iPhone 5. This was the first time we saw the removal of the 30-pin connector and being replaced to the same cable that we've been using currently, the Lightning cable. This iPhone had an insane amount of upgrades internally and externally, and during this time was when the megapixel war on cameras began. This phone also had a much larger 4-inch screen than what we've seen in the past, and continued beating record sales once it got released. But in the September 2013 keynote, that's where things got interesting. Apple not only released the latest flagship phone, but also released a cheaper alternative, the iPhone 5C. Its starting price was $100 cheaper than the 5S, and its internals weren't that bad. It was just using the previous generation A6 chip than the A7 chip found in the iPhone 5S. But the biggest differences was the 5S had a new Touch ID Sapphire fingerprint reader, and introduced us to a new color, gold.
I love gold!
But the 5C was indeed the most colorful iPhone that we ever got. It came in a variety of different colors, and the plastic back wasn't too bad. Apple claimed to be the highest quality plastic found on any phone. But now, in 2014, Apple was falling back from Android sales, and the competition was heating up. Apple needed to adapt or fall back and die. So in September 2014, Apple has officially unveiled their largest screen iPhone yet, the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus. The iPhone 6 had a screen size of 4.7 while the Plus had a 5.5. This was the largest screen we ever saw on an iPhone. They both had the usual internal upgrades as well as camera upgrades, but the Plus was the first one to ever use image stabilization motors. Within the first weekend of the phone release, it already went ahead and sold 10 million units, so sales were not falling. But after some time, consumers and a few of my friends have been reporting that their 6 Plus were starting to bend. And as Lou from Unbox Therapy has proven, this was definitely an issue, as Bendgate was a complete reality, as Lou was able to easily bend this phone without using any pressure. Apple soon did respond to this and offered a free replacement to anybody who was being affected by this. And so, in September of 2015, the iPhone 6s and the 6s Plus got released, and they reinforced the aluminum body structure to prevent Bendgate from happening again. And during this time, Apple also introduces 3D Touch, which was a new technology, a new thing that nobody has ever seen before, where it gave us quick shortcuts and new gestures on the home screen. This was also when the rose gold version of the iPhone got introduced, and this was a unicorn phone since this thing was on back order for like the longest time. But this rose gold looked more pink than rose in my opinion. And during population of those color options, this phone sold 13 million within the first weekend. Holy cow, my channel hasn't even reached 1 million views yet. What the heck? And during an Apple presentation that took place on March 2016, Apple unveiled an iPhone 5e, which basically was targeting more towards the people who weren't a big fan of the larger body and wanted a much more easier to reach screen. And this phone also came with all 4 color options, as the 6s. And since we haven't seen another E iPhone version of that phone, it's most likely sales weren't really record-breaking that Apple wanted to produce it. But continuing on September 2016, the iPhone 7 and the 7 Plus gets released. This time the 7 also has image stabilization, and both of them all get the latest spec upgrades during that era. And you're gonna have to quote me on this, but this was also the time when Apple took courage to remove the headphone jack and hand us dongles to carry around if we ever want to listen to music with an aux cable. So thank you Apple for doing that for us, right? Something that we always ask for. And during this time also they removed the home button and replaced it with a button that simulates a press by using TAC engines. So they removed the headphone jack from us and they removed the button sensation and replaced it with a phony one. That makes sense. Woohoo Apple. Then my second favorite option of the iPhone 7 got released, Product Red, in March 2017. But fast forward to 2017 and now we're caught up with the iPhone evolution. The iPhone 8 and 8 Plus are out the market, both have a glass body, both have wireless key charging, both has fast charging, both were things that some Android phones have been having for quite a while now, and most importantly, the iPhone X, just kidding, we know Apple was talking about the Roman numerals, got released, the iPhone 10. This was the first phone that brought us this highly secure Face ID and also gave us these exclusive Animoji that only works on the iPhone 10, which finally has the edge-to-edge OLED display that we've been seeing for quite some time on Android phones, but unfortunately gave us this hideous notch to look at, which somehow started a trend on some Android phones. Hopefully Apple doesn't go on that suing spree again for copying the notch. I don't know why they want to copy the notch, but they're copying the notch. And there's rumors that this upcoming Apple keynote for the iPads are gonna also unveil a gold iPhone 10. So hopefully that's a reality. It seems like a possibility from what we've seen with the past with the previous 2 generation iPhone. So that is how the iPhone got started and evolved to this present day. The phone been out for about 10 generations, so it's obviously I might have missed some stuff, especially since I'm a one-man crew. So during that time period, did you always have an iPhone? Did you switch? Or do you went straight to Android? And if I missed some stuff, feel free to comment down there and I'll keep it updated in the video description for any correction. Also, if you love saving money, I mean who doesn't, go ahead and check out my Facebook page. In there, I'll be posting all the latest deals on tech product, components, drones, anything that I see that's on sale and is worth buying will be posted on that Facebook page. So go ahead and like that page to be updated on any latest tech deals. And if you wish for me to continue the series on covering other topics like the iOS or go more in depth on the specs on how it evolved, vote up here on a little iCard, let me know, and comment down below if you have a suggestion for an upcoming evolution video. But until next time, if you really like this video, show your gratitude by smashing that like button, as well as subscribe to the channel if you're not. And until next time, I hope to see you on the next one. Peace.